Evening and welcome to the Lowdown. You know we're always excited to be here with you on a Saturday night. Folks, thank you for joining us. Share that link. Share that link. We'll be with you in 1 second here. Thank you for tuning in to the Lowdown.
And now, the Lowdown, with economist and political strategist Elson Lowe.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to the Lowdown. Folks, we've had quite an eventful week, quite an eventful couple of weeks. So we're going to talk you through everything really that has caused the stir in Guyana. We're hearing the people really on the back foot, and they can't keep our name out of their mouth, folks. So we're going to bring you through all of that. We're going to give you an idea of what has been going on. Thank you for joining the Lowdown. Share the link, folks. Share that link. Let's give everyone a chance to see the show tonight. Let's bring everyone in. Welcome to the Lowdown. I'm your host, Elson Lowe. Thank you for starting your Saturday night on a high with Elson Lowe. So folks, we're gonna cover a couple of topics tonight, but really what we're gonna cover in depth is the topic that has been causing a stir nationally for weeks now, and that is the oil spill insurance and parent company guarantee that we're looking for to get from for the operators for the Stabroek Block offshore Guyana. Folks, this is an issue that is a very serious one. So, tune in, get a good sense of it. What we want to also help people to understand is what really happens in an oil spill. What is the response in an oil spill? What are the difficulties associated with an oil spill, and what kind of preparation really is required? And that is where we're going to look at both the Exxon Valdez oil spill, and we're going to look at the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and we're going to try to give you a sense of what went on in those spills. But in addition to that, we're also going to look at just some of the longer term effects of these types of spills, so that you have some perspective regarding this, and you can understand why there's so much furor in the press. The vice president dedicating long periods of his press conferences, dedicating long periods of his press conferences to dealing with this particular issue. Some folks will note he can't seem to keep my name out of his mouth. But anyway, so folks, that's what we're going to talk about in the main tonight. But it really is the combination of several weeks of pressure the PUP has been under. As you know, we've been talking about the audit of the offshore oil expenses here in Guyana that the PUP is, first of all, didn't want to do, and second of all, is done past the deadline. We've been talking about the implications of that. We've also been talking about the implications of the leaked audit, Guyana's first audit, one audit commissioned by the coalition. We've been talking about those implications, what that has meant for Guyana. So folks, this has been a period where the PUP has been under a lot of pressure, and it has culminated, I think, with this oil spill insurance and parent company issue. But we'll take you through that in depth. Share that link, folks. Share that link. We'll take you through everything in depth. Welcome to the Lowdown. Thank you for being here on a Saturday night with us. You know, we're always here. We're always happy to have a chat with you, give you a sense of what's going on in with the major issues, help to break those issues down for you, help you to understand what's really you should be paying attention to in the course of this week's and last week's events. So folks, share that link, share that link. But that's not all. We've got some killer memes of the week for you. To start us off, we're going to have quite a little chat about our memes of the week tonight. We've got some funny stuff. We've actually seen some PvP activists that are unfortunately making a comedy of errors, which will give you a sense of it. It's quite funny. Then we were seeing people speak about things like the flooding in Georgetown and a couple other issues. So we're going to bounce into those and give you a sense of them in just a second there, folks. So share the link, share that link. Let's give everyone a chance to see this show. Let's bring everyone in. It's good to be here with you on the Lowdown. So, folks, let's jump right into our first. We're gonna jump into our first meme of the week. So let's throw that up. All right. So here you have someone saying the way people become broke after finishing studies. You might think they studied Bachelor of Poverty and Applied Suffering, and then someone said, "People is me." Folks, you know this is a really sad situation. People is me. And what we've actually seen is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana speak on this issue and say that as much as $1 trillion US has been lost to Guyana because of all of the graduates that have left the University of Guyana and migrated from Guyana. Now, I'm not sure if those figures are quite correct because just to give you some context, the entire oil industry, some estimates indicate will bring Guyana about 300 billion US. So I don't know that $1 trillion would have been lost due to UG graduates leaving, as much as it's a serious issue, because that would be 3 times the size of the oil industry. And the oil industry has caused Guyana's GDP to triple already and will probably cause it to be 10 times larger. So I think maybe she was misquoted and it was $1 trillion GUID, trillion Guyana dollars. But anyway, that's water under the bridge. The point I think is a valid one, which is that because many graduates have not been given opportunities, have not been given access, have not been able to be rewarded for their hard work, we've got a situation where people continue to leave Guyana and people have left Guyana to go further afield for many years now. So these are issues that have plagued the country for quite some time, and as a result have caused, reasonably, I think we could say, some serious issues in terms of Guyana's development. But one of the things we really want to help viewers to understand is that, you know, we believe that first of all, the University of Guyana should be free. That goes without saying. We've got so much oil revenue available. The University of Guyana should be free. Secondly, we believe that there should be student stipends. And those student stipends should help to make it easier for university graduates, for those in the University of Guyana to complete their education and to deal with the costs associated with studying. That's why we have our 50 for 50 program, $50,000 for $50,000 a month for 50,000 people who are studying to help to ease that burden as people study. That's one of the things that we're talking about. Of course, it'd be we would anticipate that with that kind of support, people would not feel broke. But in addition to that, what we've said is for all those university graduates who are unable to find the type of work that they really would compensate them well and that they'd really be comfortable with, that we would hire those graduates and put them to work doing analysis, gathering data, helping us to solve the problems that plague Guyana across a wide variety of fields, which is what you see consultants do in the US and so on, management consultants as well. So that's what we're going to do. In fact, as much as a third of university graduates from top schools in the US go into the consulting field. And so we would want to see, at least for a couple of years, graduates working in the consultant field in Guyana before they go on to a further field to serve in other areas. That is something which we are saying will ensure that we do see jobs, for university graduates that are satisfactory jobs that provide them with the type of fulfilling work that they really require. You know, man, so it should not be that people are going to be complaining that they studied a degree in brokenness and applied poverty or whatever it is. It's going to be quite the opposite, and we're going to ensure that people are well compensated. That's another thing, so that they feel comfortable staying in Ghana and don't feel the need to move and go and live somewhere else. Really, if this country has more barrels of oil per person than almost any other country, then we need to operate as if it does, and we need Guyanese to feel the benefits of all of these newfound riches, really. So that's to start us off here. Let's bounce over to our next meme of the week as we continue. Okay, so here we've got a really funny one pointed out by Gordon Mosley here. So you've got a candidate for the PvP in Region 10. And this candidate has indicated that, the coalition, this road, they build a road and the road break up and you should vote for PvP because the road is in a shambles. And the funny thing about this is that when Gordon Mosley looked at it, he said to himself, but do you realize that this $52 million road, big road, was built by the Ministry of Public Works less than 2 years ago? And it was built by the PvP because it was less than 2 years ago. And, there was a grand opening, walk along, there you can see, and I will give you a big image in a second, Minister Juan Edgel walking there on the road. Look at the state of that road, only 2 years, and that road looks like that. Oh my goodness. Folks, we remind you, a road is supposed to last 20 years. 2 years in, this is the state of the road. One member of the government was telling me, oh, but contractors are liable for any damages within a 1 year period. I said, man, maybe that needs to be moved to 5 years because this is a 2 year road you're looking at. This is unbelievable. It's supposed to be that the road doesn't sustain this level of damage. Rips right along the road, multiple deep potholes you see in there. The side, let's go to the next shot there, operator. Oh my goodness, look at the side of that road. You can see that it's giving away and the water is filling it up. Half of the road is high, half of the road is low and in water. Goodness me, and this is a supposedly new road. Let's jump across to the next slide as we continue the conversation. There you go, you have the minister there on the road. Yes, we built this road. We're looking forward to this road. Goodness me, folks. Goodness me. Folks, we always say that these types of things should be investigated for procurement fraud, so we know exactly what is going on. Because if the road is supposed to have a certain amount of material and so on, it's supposed to last for 20 years, we shouldn't be seeing these types of problems. But sadly, we're continually faced with these kinds of issues here in Guyana. Let's jump over to the next slide. We got another slide of the road. Let's jump over to the next slide. Okay, folks, so this was the road when it was done. Yeah, the minister doing his walkabout. But as we're looking here at this road, do you notice something funny about this road, folks? There's a couple things that are funny about this road. First of all, no shoulders, right? Or at least on this right-hand side, you're not seeing a shoulder altogether. And on the left-hand side, I don't think that's a shoulder. It looks like there's a drain, not a proper shoulder. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, does it strike you that this road is, having just been completed, not smooth? Does it strike you that it is not smooth? That it already has up and down, bumps here and there, bumps here and there? That may mean that the road was not properly compacted. It may mean that the level of bitumen, the level of tar that they use on these roads, asphalt, is not thick enough to ensure that the road is smooth. I mean, I am not an engineer, but roads are not supposed to be, to my mind, that rough once completed. That seems strange to me. Could be wrong. But folks, when you look at that and when you see that the road is uneven, what happens is that, and again, I'm not an engineer, but you have puddles of water that collect in various parts of the road. And that actually creates the conditions for potholes early on in the life of the road. And so right from the start, the minister walking on the road, I would think might have, noticed that something is off. I don't know how come he didn't notice. I don't know what was going on there. Maybe, it was, music was playing loud, so he was distracted. But this road, right from the get-go, this road looked like trouble, right? I mean, when the road is finished, and you look, it's nicely painted, everything looks like, you have a full road. When a road is done, it's supposed to be smooth. It's not supposed to be uneven. And if you have, and you can already see little areas where water is gathering, right? So the water is not flowing off the road evenly. It's gathering in little pockets. What happens is those little pockets become your potholes because the water, is able to damage the road because it rests on the road. It's not able to draw off. Now, when we let's go back, operator, to the first slide where we actually saw the big holes in that road. Look at those holes, right? And then you can see, if you look closely, viewers, that down the street you've got several of those potholes, right? It's not just one. Well, it's not just three. Sorry, not one, three. Three big potholes. You've got a couple more potholes down the street there, folks. Goodness me, goodness me. And there you go, that's another shot of it. Look at all of those potholes leading all the way down the road. And then the entire shoulder is given away. Now, we just mentioned, folks, we just mentioned this road didn't have what looked to be the type of shoulders that you'd expect. And now you see the road is given away. Folks, that was $52 million. Now, $52 million was supposed to build a road that's going to last you for 20 years. $52 million. You spend $52 million and the road is not smooth when you complete it? You spend $52 million and the road is not smooth when you complete the road? I mean, that's amazing to me. That is a lot of money. But folks, you know, the PvP is 100% on board with not seeing Guyana get the type of quality of works that we should see, and that's why this is a perfect example of something that should be investigated for procurement fraud, because it could be that the right amount of materials and whatnot were not used. It could be that the engineer certified this thing without it actually meeting up to standards, because engineers are supposed to certify these roads before they're given over to the government. Those are the type of things that need to be investigated so that we know the truth. But the funniest thing of all, folks, the funniest thing of all, and the reason that this makes our list for memes of the week, the reason this makes our list for memes of the week is this. The person highlighting this road, the person saying, oh, look at the awful job done, is a PvP activist. That's the best part of it. So the PvP themselves, without realizing this, they have themselves recognized that there's something that is wrong here. Now, maybe the person will come out now and say that they are not affiliated with PvP. I believe that they are a candidate in Linden. And then the regional chairman in Linden has indicated that this is what is going on. Now, if I'm wrong, I stand corrected. But that is that is what makes the entire thing quite hilarious, folks, quite hilarious. So even the PvP is pointing out, oh my goodness, there's a problem with this road. Look at the poor work done here. Look at what they done. PvP is saying that. But PvP is saying that about the PvP. Just delightful, folks. Really top-notch stuff. Top-notch stuff coming from the government there. Truly unbelievable. But, you know, I put it to you this way. Look at that road. Already rough. Already rough. You're riding on that road and it bunks in you. Goodness me. A new road bunks in you like that. You got the minister standing there with a big crew. How is it that he's not seeing this road is rough? Oh man, oh man. Hey, well, you know, I don't know if the area had a lot of loud music that day or there was a hot barbecue and he was smelling the barbecue and that's why he wasn't paying attention to the road. It could happen, you know, it could be that he was just distracted by something. You know, there was a large flock of birds overhead and that's why he wasn't looking down on the road. I don't know, folks. I don't know. But it seems strange to me that a road that is right from the get-go uneven, everything is normal, it's the passing through, everything seems fine. You know, no big deal. That seems strange to me. Anyway, but, you know, building off of that, we've now got a situation where, you know, I think if you ask any Guyanese, do you find that the roads in Guyana don't last any kind of time on the PvP? Tell you honest truth. Do you find they don't last any kind of time? 2 weeks, you start to see these roads given away. 2 weeks. You know, I was even on a road that they did in Georgetown recently. Of course, you know, they're trying to neaten up things now. They have local government election. And the road has only been done a couple of months. And you're already starting to get the impression like little parts of this road sinking or something is off. You know, already getting that impression. Goodness me, folks, goodness me. And again, that's a road without proper shoulders. Now, on the other hand, when you look at some of the housing schemes that's in South and so on, that Burnham would have put in place, those roads are still just like, you know, I don't want to say new, but they don't have potholes. They're not uneven. You can drive comfortably along the road. It's not a big hassle. The roads are nice and smooth. Goodness me, those are concrete roads that were built way back when. And we're talking about, you know, decades ago those roads were built. As we have said, a road is supposed to last you 20 years. It is not supposed to, after 2 years, be up in flames or on the water, and more precisely on the water. Anyway, we want to extend our thanks to that PUP candidate for highlighting that particular problem with PUP infrastructure works. We appreciate we appreciate the assistance. And if you see anything else, PUP candidates, why don't you just highlight them for us so we can take a look? Thank you so much, PUP candidates. But Dario, isn't that the 52 million road the Ministry of Public Works built less than 2 years ago and had a grand opening, walk along and all? Oh, Gordon Mosley, oh, Gordon. When they see him post, they probably start sweating. You know, oh goodness me. But anyway, so hey, if you're a candidate for local government elections and you want to highlight a road that PUP has not done well, or where there might be a problem, or where there's a need for procurement, an investigation into procurement fraud, go right on ahead. We love it. We appreciate it. Do what you gotta do. So that's one meme of the week. Let's keep on rolling here, folks, because you know we got lots of stuff to go with. Here we go. In an oil-rich country, while PUP runs things, or is it that things are running them? Goodness, look at this flooding. Look at this flooding in Georgetown, folks. We only had a couple of days rain, not even continuous rain, and all over Georgetown you're seeing substantial floods. Goodness me, really, I mean, that looks deep, doesn't it? The color of that water, that looks deep. Goodness me, can you imagine you're trying to wade your way in there and all of a sudden you fall in a trench? Goodness. Let's jump over to the next slide there, folks, as we continue along. Man, this street, if you look at it, the whole street flooded. The entire street is flooded as far as the eye can see. You can see the silvery reflection of the sky on the water all the way down that street. Folks, a lot of these types of streets in Georgetown and the surrounding areas did not flood like this under the APNUAFC. What happened is money was provided to local government so that local government could do its job. Local government has been starved of resources, absolutely starved of resources. And so instead you've got these little lakes that spring up when you have rain in the city. Even if it is one night's rain, all of a sudden you have a problem. Totally unacceptable. And folks, you have to recall that the last year's budget was $782 billion. Huge budget. In fact, if you look at one of the budgets on the coalition, which is about $260 or so billion, that was in, I think, 2018. From 2018 to now, 5 years. This year's budget is nearly 3 times as large as the budgets on the coalition. Folks, let me say that again. The budget under the PUP is nearly triple the budget under the coalition. Triple the budget. And we have to see Georgetown flooding like this, looking like a big lake, looking like a big swamp. They could go and catch fish. Folks, you look at you go and catch fish there. What are we doing? Why does it make sense for us to be spending more money, spending so much more money, triple the amount of money, and have the same problems? Goodness me, absolutely unacceptable. Operator, let's jump over to the next image because I think we got one more image about this flooding here. Goodness, look at this. Poor bike man fighting in the flood waters. Poor bike man. You know, if you only put on your foot in the water, if you only put on your foot, can't stop the bike, you know. If you stop the bike, you're in the flood waters. Goodness me. This is what it has come to, folks. If you put down your foot in the flood waters, you are. That is what is going on. That is what the PUP has brought things to in Georgetown by refusing to give the mayor and city council the monies that they're required to give, that they're supposed to get, that are allotted to them, refusing to give them those monies to help them to take care of the city. And so whenever it floods, it's like this. And we remind you that the coalition was not like that. Georgetown was quite dry. That's because we cleaned the drains regularly, because we cleaned garbage up. Garbage pickup was on time. The city was clean. Drains were maintained, well maintained. And so as a result, you didn't have this type of widespread flooding. But that's what we've got right now. Widespread flooding. Widespread. Oh my goodness. Poor bicycle man, fighting through the rain there. Goodness me. Well, that's it, folks. We always like to have ourselves a couple memes of the week. We like to have a quick chat about what's going on in the country, what people on social media are complaining about, what people on social media are highlighting. We like to have a chat about that. So those are some of the things that have come up over the course of the week. Now, folks, we want to dive now into the meat of the matter, which is what's going on with this insurance fight, the offshore spill question. I want to dive into the meat of the matter there and give you some perspective as to what's going on there, folks. So here's where there's so much controversy. Here's where there's so much controversy. So what has happened is that there are several permits that have been issued for offshore oil and gas production, environmental permits. Each new development has to get an environmental permit. And we had put into the language of the permits that there needs to be both insurance coverage and the parent company guarantee. So if there's an oil spill, the additional cost over the cost of the insurance, the additional cost would be dealt with by the company. All right? That's what we had said. Now, what has happened is that the PUP was not enforcing this provision. It's a provision that we introduced, they carried on with, and they've just not been enforcing it. But some patriotic citizens, in fact, one of them, I believe, is from the Transparency Institute in Guyana, came forward and actually filed a case. And in that case, the person indicated that, listen, this is not acceptable. We need to see compliance with the permit. A judge ruled, Justice Kisun, ruled that this is indeed the case and the EPA needs to see compliance with the permit, or the offshore operator in the Stabroek Block is going to have to stop oil production. They need to comply with this. They need to ensure that we're adequately covered in the event of an oil spill. Now, the government, seeing this, has rushed to defend the oil companies and has decided they're going to appeal this ruling. They have got a judgment in the favor of the nation, and they're appealing that to try to ensure that oil and gas companies don't have to provide as much coverage here in Guyana in the case of an oil spill. Now, one of the things that is important to note about this, and where the government is trying to fight its way out of this, trying to make excuses, they throw in 5, 6, 7 excuses at you. What they're saying is, oh, you have to have a definitive amount, it has to be a specific dollar value. But that's for the court to decide, and the court has already decided that we need to have the type of unlimited guarantee, a guarantee from the parent company that will cover whatever costs. We need to see that. That's what's in the permit, the plain languages. So the government is trying to say, oh, this is what it means, rather than listening to the court. That's the first point. But the second point, and this is what's really interesting and important for us to understand, that's why we want to lean into a little bit of the history of some of these oil spills, give our viewers some perspective as to how bad these oil spills can get, and why this is such a contentious issue. Is that oil spills are one of those things where, folks, it is not something that you can easily and consistently deal with. They tend to be very tricky. And that's because there's a lot of different elements involved. One is if it's a blowout and it's a spill coming directly from the reservoir on the water. Really capping that reservoir, stopping that spill, is a very difficult and tricky thing to do. And often people are not able to do it right away. The BP oil spill, the largest oil spill, which ran up to the hundreds of billions of costs, and at least 60 billion BP itself was responsible for. That oil spill, it took them several months to get that sorted out. And they tried several different types of techniques. And today we'll look at a quick video that shows you all the different techniques that they tried. And a lot of techniques were half effective, not effective. They even went so far as dumping rubber tires into the well to try and see if that would block it. I mean, truly crazy things that happened, just to try and stop it from spilling. But there's also the Exxon Valdez spill, which some of you may recall from a little bit further back in history, where you had an oil tanker that ran aground and spilled oil, and cleaning that up was also very difficult. Stopping the spill was also very difficult. So it is a very tricky thing, and so being able to estimate what the costs will be is very, very tricky. It's hard for us to really say what it could be. I mean, it could end up being as much as 60 billion, or it could end up being a couple of billion. There's no way really to know. And so that's why we've got this provision in the permit which makes it more unlimited. The problem as well is that the company that has signed all these agreements, including the permit, is a subsidiary of ExxonMobil. And that is a limited liability company. So if there's a problem, they can just fold up that company, declare bankruptcy, and Exxon itself would not have to pay anything. That is why I think there's a lot of controversy and concern around this. And that's why the government stance is particularly disturbing. So folks, we're going to dive first of all into a quick video. I'll ask our operator to bring up that video about the Exxon Valdez spill, just to give some perspective as to one of the dangers here. And it's important for us to highlight for Guyanese that the dangers we face regarding an oil spill are not just that we're going to have a blowout from the actual reservoir deep below the ocean. But you know, there are ships coming and going all the time, oil tankers coming and going all the time. And if there happens to be a problem with one of those oil tankers, that is another risk that we have to look at. If the oil tanker that is carrying away, as an example, Exxon's crude oil, there's a problem there. That's something else we would have to look at. You know, maybe the FPSO might have an explosion on the surface, and that would be another problem. So there are different elements to this, and we don't want it to be perceived as just a one-off thing, but it's actually an issue which could be large in scale and complex in its fix. So we'll have our operator just throw up that quick video about the Exxon Valdez spill, and we'll take some notes from it and discuss on the other side.
This should have been the easiest spill in the world to clean up.
It's not only the worst oil spill in U.S. history, it's by far the largest in such a remote, pristine area. The tanker, the Exxon Valdez, had just loaded more than 1 million barrels of Alaskan crude. It was about 25 miles from the Valdez terminal and was apparently trying to dodge ice flows from the nearby Columbia Glacier when it ran aground.
I want to assure everyone that Exxon is mobilizing all available resources to mitigate the impact from this incident. Exxon has assumed full financial responsibility for the incident.
Exxon has come under heavy criticism for not moving more rapidly to clean up the spill.
The crews have not arrived yet to begin cleaning the slime off the island's beaches and rocks. That probably won't happen until next week. Exxon says it cannot do the job in a hasty, haphazard manner.
And there's no doubt this is a major tragedy both for the environment and for the people up there.
Day 10 of the oil spill crisis, and the cleanup effort still just beginning. A few crews are on a few beaches removing a little bit of oil, but there are hundreds of miles of affected coastline. Exxon, which is running the operation, is coming under heavy criticism from state and federal officials.
Where the existing management structure of this cleanup is not adequate to the task, then we're going to do it ourselves, independent of that.
State officials in Alaska have made an accounting of what's happened to the spill, now covering an area of over 3,000 square miles. Exxon has had problems not only with its recovery efforts, but also with the continued leakage of oil from its crippled tanker. Officials say a small amount of oil still seeps from the holes in the ship, and containment booms around the vessel are not stopping it completely.
This is one of the many small armies Exxon has mobilized to wipe up oil-soaked beaches stone by stone. Jay Hare, president of the National Wildlife Federation, watched the work for a while and then just muttered.
I appreciate these folks doing this, but quite frankly, I don't see that it's doing a hell of a lot of good.
Hare calls this futile, and he says oil rubbed into the rocks will take longer to evaporate. He intends to push for a new national energy policy, hoping that a national sense of outrage will add to his political muscle.
After the Exxon Valdez ran aground, Exxon spent $3.8 billion on cleanup, but the crews only scratched the surface.
If you just let the water stand for even just a minute, then the oil blobs will start to show.
Still there 21 years after the spill.
All right, folks. So you got a good sense of things there. A couple of points that I wanted to just to highlight for you. One being that you saw that really, I don't know if you know this, but I mean, maybe it's a specialized paper towel or something. But there are people manually going around with paper towels trying to sap up the oil, if you can believe that. That was what we were looking at here, which is why you saw an environmentalist say that this is, as we say in Ghana, this ain't making sense. You go around paper towels trying to sap up the oil. That's the first thing. The second thing is you saw that despite them trying to capture the oil spill itself, they were not able to get the ship to stop continuing to spill small amounts of oil, even while they tried to hold things together. So, you know, having one intervention, the problem with these oil spills is that one intervention doesn't always work. It requires multiple interventions, and that's why we're saying that it's very difficult to estimate the costs, right? You can have multiple times that you have to go back and deal with the costs there. And then the third thing that we really want to point out there is that is indicated that there's still oil there. 25 years had passed and there was still oil there, and only half the wildlife had come back. Which is to say that it's very difficult to effectively do this. And that's why we need to ensure there is enough money allocated. You saw the governor of Alaska in that same short clip there say that the government would have to step in and do it if Exxon couldn't do it. And you saw that there was complaint about the delay, how long it took them to actually act regarding that oil spill. So all of that is something that we have to keep in mind. Now that let's talk a little bit about the permit before we get into another video to give you a bit more insight. But there's a couple things in that in this discussion of the permit that are really quite troubling, right? One of them being that it's been indicated that the EPA has indicated. Let me see if I can get the wording up for here for you guys, because it ties in quite well to what we're talking about in terms of the dangers here. The EPA has said that negotiations for a insurance essentially was about $2 billion, and it said that there were also agreed terms and conditions for renegotiations based on increased risks and next steps if unfulfilled obligations exceed the $2 billion guaranteed amount, that $2 billion insurance. Now, folks, we just pointed to a situation where there was continued changes in costs, where it was really unclear what was going on, where time was of the essence, and where you were seeing delays in the cleanup of the oil spill. And the EPA is going to come out here and say that they want conditions for negotiations, and that next steps, they're going to have discussions on next steps. Folks, the issue here is that this is not the environment within which you're going to want to be engaging in some kind of a negotiation and trying to figure things out. Because, of course, the oil is would be spilling into the ocean. So you have to be decisive and act. And you don't want it to be that there comes a situation where it's sort of a, oh, you pay for it from the Sovereign Wealth Fund, from the Natural Resources Fund. You pay for it from your monies that you have set aside, Guyana. We'll reimburse you. Which I can tell you is 100% what they're going to say. 100%. We don't want that to be the case because it could wipe out the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Public servants might even struggle to be paid because the treasury might be totally obliterated. I mean, you're talking about a very expensive event here. And there's a $2 billion guarantee that's mentioned by the EPA. But that Exxon Valdez spill, we just told you was over $3 billion, was 3.8, I believe, already. So that is already, $2 billion is below what would happen in a major oil spill, and there's bigger ones. We're going to get to that in a minute. Now, in addition to that, one of the key issues the judges also raised is that there was also a insurance that was provided of $600 million. So this is in addition to $2 billion. There's another $600 million. But that $600 million does not meet the criteria set out in the permit, the environmental permit, because it doesn't come from an insurer that has the appropriate rating level. And so, even when there's insurance, it's not the right insurance. So this is Just a comedy of errors and a series of headaches, really, for Guyana here. And that's why we've been pressing for the government not to appeal this judgment until they go forward. Now let's look, we've got another quick video on the BP disaster, the BP blowout. So we're going to look into that next. And that is going to give you some further insight as to some of the problems that are different than the Exxon Valdez problems, but that we might face nonetheless. And to give you some perspective as to some of the dangers. One of the other things to note, I don't know if you picked it up from that Exxon Valdez spill there, and as we continue the discussion, we'll highlight for you, is that oil spilled and went far. It covered over 1,000 kilometers of coastline. It is entirely feasible, and some reports have indicated, that the oil could make its way all the way to Jamaica and Jamaican beaches and so on. I mean, you're talking about a monstrous disaster. And in particular, if the EPA has to go and negotiate how much is going to be spent and who's going to pay for these things while the oil is spilling, that is also disastrous. It could end up being a situation where you have more oil being spilled while these kind of wranglings are going on and there's discussions of whether or not the company is going to pay. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster. I mean, what is going on? Folks, let's get the operative. We can get the next video up around the BP spill. We'll lean into that one and take a look at what happened there and what some of the risks that might be applicable to Guyana are there.
April 20th. An explosion on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig kills 11 workers. 5,000 feet beneath the surface of the Gulf of Mexico, crude oil spews from a well 13,000 feet under the seabed. According to government and BP estimates, it's leaking 42,000 gallons a day. April 22nd, the $560 million rig sinks. Observers spot a 5-mile-long oil slick. BP applies 1,900 gallons of an oil dispersant to mitigate the growing slick. That makes the oil break up and sink below the surface. April 25th, BP uses robots to activate a blowout preventer. But because the blowout preventer is damaged and it's too difficult at 5,000 feet for robots to do that work, the operation fails. April 28th, the Coast Guard begins controlled fires to burn off the oil from the surface in an attempt to slow the spread of the slick. BP continues to apply chemical dispersants on the surface. The government revises the leak estimates, 210,000 gallons a day. May 2nd. BP begins work on 2 relief wells scheduled for completion by August. May 5th, BP tows a 98-ton containment chamber to the site of the leak. May 6th, the oil slick reaches the shores of the Chandeleur Islands. May 7th, BP lowers a containment dome to the floor of the ocean. It places it on top of the leaky riser pipe, hoping to capture the oil and gas and pump it to the surface. A slush of frozen oil and sediment clogs the dome's intake. The effort fails. May 14th, BP constructs a pipe. It's a mile long. At one end, the leak. At the other, a tanker on the surface collects the oil. It works, collecting 84,000 gallons a day, barely making a dent. May 26th, top kill and junk shot. BP drops mud, shredded tires, and rubber balls into the leak to stem the flow and seal it with cement. May 29th, top kill and junk shot fail. The oil breaks through, unabated. By some estimates, up to 250,000 barrels of oil are floating on the surface of the Gulf. Scientists discovered the 830,000 gallons of dispersants sprayed throughout the Gulf and at the wellhead have caused massive clouds of beaded oil to hover at mid-depths. They further discover a 6-mile wide and 22-mile long cloud of the beaded oil threatening a vital underwater rainforest, the DeSoto Canyon, 20 miles northeast of the Deepwater Horizon wreck site. May 27th, scientists confirmed that the spill is the worst in U.S. history, surpassing the Exxon Valdez, with a leak rate between 504 and 798,000 gallons a day, and that's the estimate at the low end. May 31st, BP begins a new operation, cut the riser pipe and seal it with a fitted dome. June 1st, oil reaches the barrier islands off Mississippi and Alabama. June 2nd, 88,000 square miles of federal fisheries are declared off limits. June 3rd, BP succeeds in shearing off one section of the riser, but a massive saw is stuck while making further needed cuts. June 4th, BP successfully connects the containment cap to the shorn riser and begins pumping oil to tanker ships on the surface. June 7th, BP claims 10,000 barrels a day are being captured, and it's possible more than 100 million gallons of oil have spilled so far.
Okay, folks, so you saw that kind of a timeline of what happened in that particular spill. One of the things to notice is, you know, as the spill went along, I don't know if you picked this up, but the amount that was being spilled daily kept increasing. I don't know if that's because the hole is being expanded due to the pressure of the oil that was trying to escape or something to that effect. But essentially what was going on is that it started off with 42,000 gallons being spilled every day, and it reached, was it 500,000 gallons of oil being spilled every day. So it continued to accelerate, and that's one of the questions around delays and time, is that the longer you take with these things, the more oil that could be spilled. And in the case of BP there, you saw an acceleration in the amount of oil. So the longer that you didn't deal with it, the more oil was being spilled, the faster the oil was being spilled. Again, that is very, very alarming for us here in Guyana. Absolutely troubling, I would say. You know, and then as you saw in the video, there were, what was it, like 3 or 4 different interventions. They tried to get a cap on it to pump out some of the oil. The cap got plugged. They tried to install a pipe to take off the oil onto a tanker, but the pipe was only capturing some of the oil, not nowhere near enough of the oil. They also tried putting shredded tires and rubber balls in there and concrete in the well to try and seal it off. That wasn't working. You saw that underwater equipment was getting stuck. You saw that underwater robots were not able to operate at that depth. I mean, it's a very tricky situation, and as a result, you also saw that a huge area of the coast, huge area, it was 82,000 square kilometers, something like that. I'm not sure, I have to check that back. But a huge area of the coast was cordoned off from fishing. And so we've already got a fishing industry that's under tremendous pressure here in Guyana, not getting access to places to fish that they would previously ever got access to, not getting licenses from neighboring Suriname to fish, seeing their catches decline, seeing the price of fish double, seeing all of that. Now you'd have a situation where the entire area under question, and could be right across the coastline of Guyana. That would be a place where fishermen cannot fish. Can you imagine that? I mean, that would be truly ridiculous, truly ridiculous. But those are some of the concerns and the costs now of the livelihood of fishermen being disrupted. A very substantial cost, because, you know, there's thousands of fishermen that would be affected by something like that. The shrimp industry, where we catch shrimp offshore, that would, I'm sure, be affected in the same way. And shrimp is one of our largest exports, even without the onshore activities that are going on now. Shrimp in general has been one of our largest exports for some time. So that would be truly catastrophic on multiple levels. And, you know, it's not even clear how quickly our company will be able to deal with such an event, because it's very tricky to deal with. Multiple different interventions were tried. Didn't work. It's very, very tricky to deal with. You know, and so those are some of the things that we have to bear in mind when we take this kind of fast and loose approach when it comes to the level of insurance that we've got in Guyana. Very fast and loose approach, and that's why I think there's been such a really outrage over this issue. Now we're just gonna close off with one last video here, which will talk about the lasting effects of oil and gas spills and give you some perspective as to the cleanup effort. Because the other thing that we want to highlight is that it is not just a short turbo and try and clean up the oil, everything turns back to normal, but rather that we'll end up having to deal with the legacy of such an oil spill, if ever it were to happen. And of course we hope that it never happens. That would be absolutely awful. But what are some of the long-term consequences that we'll be facing here in Guyana if there were such a spill, and if the PPP is allowed to persist with its policy of being lax around insurance, and in fact going to the court to try and stop Guyana from getting the insurance coverage and the parent company guarantee that the parent company will clean up, will pay for the cleanup of these sorts of oil and gas the disasters. Let's go to the next video just to add some more perspective, and that video will actually give you a sense of the distance that oil traveled during the BP spill. It was quite a far away, so you'll have some perspective as to how many islands of the Caribbean might be affected.
Have you ever tried to remove a liquid from another liquid? It's not really that easy. There's a reason that they say oil and water don't mix, and it's not just because they literally don't mix. Hey everyone, thank you for watching D-News Today. I'm Trace. Oil is a mainstay for modern post-industrial revolution society. We run our engines and heat and power our homes with it. And even with all the precautions and cost involved, sometimes we accidentally spill it everywhere. Most recently in Refugio State Beach on the central coast of California on May 19th, but also in Yellowstone National Park, in Montana, in the Black Sea, Israel, Louisiana, Indiana, Curacao, and in North Dakota thrice. And that's just in the last year and a half. Cleaning up the spill is heavily studied. But what happens later? What happens 5, 10, 50 years after an oil spill? Is everything just hunky-dory? Not at all. On March 24, 1989, the Exxon Valdez oil tanker ran aground, spilling more than 11 million gallons of crude oil into waters off the coast of Alaska. At the time, it was the largest oil spill in U.S. history. More than 1,000 miles of shoreline were covered in the toxic hydrocarbon chemical, and more than 2,000 sea otters, 300 harbor seals, and 250,000 seabirds died following the spill. The Exxon Valdez was a huge story when I was a kid, and by volume it was only eclipsed by the April 2010 Deepwater Horizon spill by BP. These two spills are affecting flora and fauna in massive numbers, but now years later, what's happening? Even after cleanup is considered done, oil is still in the environment. For example, tar balls wash up onshore months or years later. Tar balls are crusty, weathered balls filled with a soft, gooey oil, like a toasted marshmallow of death. When I think of an oil spill, I picture water with a thin layer of oil on top, spreading for miles, which is the first stage of the spill. Eventually, the sun, wind, waves, ocean bacteria, and other forces act on that oil, creating tar balls. The sun helps evaporate the lighter components, leaving behind the heavy chemical compounds. Sand and tiny particles in the ocean water collect into the oil, and the sun, waves, and wind form the oil into an emulsion. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, says it looks like chocolate pudding, and is even stickier than the original spilled oil. If it comes in contact with the beach or a rock, it can crack open again, causing new tiny oil spills. Some cleanups are so severe, the topmost layer of sand is completely removed on a beach, and new uncontaminated sand is brought in. Scientific American wrote in 2003 that bacterial growth is inhibited on beaches, and in Alaska, toxicity remained for a decade or more. Mammals and ducks will eat prey that are contaminated with oil. Mussel beds are still recovering in Alaska. An estimated time for that? 30 years. According to the National Wildlife Foundation, turtles and dolphins are still being affected by oil in the Gulf, with turtles stranding themselves at 5 times the normal rate, and a new study in PLOS ONE finding adrenal and lung lesions in Gulf dolphins because of the inhalation of oil fumes when they come up for air. Under the water, life is also hit hard whenever oil spills. But humans are quick to forget and move on because, we don't live down there. Coral in the Gulf were covered in oil, and dead and dying coral were found 7 miles from the BP spill site. A study published in Science after the Exxon Valdez spill found even a few molecules of oil out of every billion, known as parts per billion, was enough to harm some animals, like salmon, whose mortality rates increased for years after the spill because sensitive fish eggs were contacted by tiny amounts of toxic crude oil. Oil is toxic. Inhalation or ingestion of and contact with hydrocarbons can be really bad for humans and animals. But the decades of cleanup and response can affect the ecosystem in so many ways. Even the propellers of boats can disturb and kill wildlife. Today, 26 years later, oil is still found on the beaches of Alaska, and although some species have returned to pre-spill levels, some species of fish, whale, and bird are not recovering at all. More recently, NOAA created a model of how sea currents likely carried the BP Deepwater Horizon oil along the Gulf Coast past Florida into the Caribbean and the Atlantic. Though years go by and the media move on, spills like these go on to affect waterways for generations to come. So when spills like these do happen, who pays for all the cleanup? Luckily, Test Tube's crack research team explored that exact thing right here.
Well, usually the company overseeing the oil when it's spilled is the most at fault. But there are cases where a single person is charged as well. The captain of a ship which spills oil, for instance, may be investigated for negligence.
Thank you for watching D News. Please subscribe so that you get all of our...
Thank you for looking at that there, folks. So, I don't know if you caught it right at the end there, but you could see that there was actually, goodness me, quite a long way that the oil had made it from the BP oil spill, heading all the way out through the Caribbean Sea and into the Atlantic Ocean, spreading right out across many different areas. And in fact, you know, that is the concern here, is that an oil spill offshore Guyana would be carried by the currents and the winds up through the Caribbean Sea, affecting as many, I believe it's 14 Caribbean islands, reaching as far as we indicated earlier as Jamaica, but possibly reaching to the US as well, depending on the size of the spill, you know. So this is where we're really, I think there's serious concern, because what will happen is we'll have strained diplomatic relations, to say the least, with the various countries that are affected. Right? They're gonna come to Guyana and say, "Hey, man, you got to take care of this," and so that will be another problem that Guyana will have to deal with. So that is why it's really vital that we have the highest levels of safety protocols, and we have the highest levels of insurance, and we have the highest, we have the type of unlimited parent company guarantee that we're talking about, is because there could be very significant diplomatic ramifications for this, Another thing is important to note is that Guyana's beaches, from Shell Beach all the way down the coast, 63 Beach, throughout Georgetown, all of those areas presumably would have oil wash up, or could have oil wash up on them and have to be cleaned up. And so we would have a very toxic environment offshore, right on the beaches in Guyana. Imagine the seawall being covered with a thick layer of oil. Can you imagine that? That would be truly awful. The smell of it, the chemicals involved, the wildlife dead, you know, a lot of birds and so on would be covered in oil. It'd be really just a massive headache, a massive disaster, whether the oil might be swept into some of our riverine systems. All of those are questions we would have to ask ourselves. And certainly, you know, Shell Beach is a site that, you know, we have leatherback turtles. And it's a site that we should take great pride in as a country, given that we have the largest turtles, I believe the largest turtles in the world there. But that entire area would be decimated by an offshore oil spill. Absolutely decimated by an offshore oil spill. And so, you know, we want to give you a sense, and I hope that today has given you a sense of the consequences, of the costs, of the difficulties involved in this, and why it is vital that we stand up to the PPP here, and that we get them to, it's not that we need them to do anything new, we just need them to comply with the existing laws and permits, to not be fighting in the court to stop these things from happening. We just need the government to go along with what already exists. Folks, on that note, we come to the end of another episode of The Lowdown. Thank you for joining me as always, and you have a good rest of the weekend.
Thank you for watching our program. See you right back here, same place, same time. And remember, hold the line of battle, comrades. Our victory is sure.